The sound of my own blood dripping onto the hardwood floor seemed deafening in the sudden silence, louder than the ragged beat of my heart. I blinked through the haze of pain, vision narrowing to crimson droplets soaking into the beige rug I had worked 3 months to afford. My mother's handprint still burned across my cheek, while my father's fingers pressed cruelly into my arm, pinning me against the bookshelf where my head had struck the corner. "You ungrateful brat!" Linda spat, her wedding ring catching the late afternoon sun as she reached for her purse with a dramatic flourish. "You think you're better than us now, Emily?" Behind her, my daughter Ava stood frozen in the doorway. Her small hands trembling, her wide eyes filled with terror. She was only 8, but old enough to understand that something irreversible had broken in that moment. "Mom!" she cried, rushing toward me. But Linda, her own grandmother, blocked her path with an arm like a barrier. "Stay out of this, little girl," she hissed, her voice sharp with contempt. "Maybe if your mother listened like Samantha does, she wouldn't get punished." Samantha. Always Samantha. The younger daughter who never held a steady job but was still treated like royalty. I could almost laugh through the pain at how predictable it all was. My name is Emily Carter, and this is the story of how my parents, Linda and Robert, tried to destroy me in front of my child, and how I refused to let them win. I struggled to stand, blood trickling down my temple, my legs weak, but my will hardening. On the coffee table, my phone screen still glowed with the text that had started this nightmare. "Rent is due. Help your sister out. We raised you better than this." I had ignored the message. Ava's dental surgery had drained my emergency fund, and I wasn't about to bankroll Samantha's lifestyle yet again. 2 hours later, Linda and Robert had appeared at my duplex like vultures, pounding on the door like debt collectors. I had opened it only to be met with Robert's smug face and Linda's demand. "Why aren't you answering our messages?" "I've already told you," I said firmly, though my voice shook inside. "I can't pay Samantha's rent this month." Robert's lips curled in sarcasm. "Oh, so your daughter's dentist bill is more important than your sister's roof over her head?" I'd stood my ground, even as they barged inside uninvited. "I'm not responsible for her choices. She refuses to work. That's on her, not me." That's when Linda lost control, screaming, throwing her purse across the room, then striking me. Robert shoved me, my head smashing against the wood. Now they sat on my couch like tyrants, while Ava wept in the corner, her sobs ignored. "You'll transfer the money," Robert barked, his voice echoing through my home, "or we stay right here until you do." I looked at Ava, at her tear-streaked face and trembling shoulders. Something in me snapped, not into weakness, but into steel. "Get out," I whispered, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. Linda laughed. "Or what? You'll call the police on your own parents? Don't be pathetic." I didn't argue. I simply walked to Ava, took her hand, and led her to the bedroom. With trembling fingers, I locked the door behind us. Ava clutched me in the dark, whispering through her sobs. "Mom, why do Grandma and Grandpa hate you?" I had no answer. But lying there in silence, listening to my parents settle into my living room as if it were theirs, I realized this was the night everything would change. That night stretched into eternity. Ava curled against me on the narrow bed, her little fingers gripping mine so tightly that I could feel her pulse through her skin. I whispered lullabies I hadn't sung since she was a toddler, though my voice trembled with every word. Beyond the locked door, I could hear my parents moving about, Linda rummaging in the fridge like she owned it, Robert's heavy steps pacing back and forth across the living room floor. Every thud made my body flinch. Sleep was impossible. My temple throbbed from where my head had struck the bookshelf, and I could taste copper in my mouth. But it wasn't just the physical pain, it was the clarity that came with it. Lying there, I began connecting dots I had avoided for years. Linda and Robert's favoritism had always been obvious. Samantha was the golden child, the one they coddled despite her never keeping a job longer than a month. I, on the other hand, had been the responsible one, the workhorse. I put myself through night classes, landed a decent job in IT security, and raised Ava on my own after her father left. Yet, no matter what I achieved, I was still the selfish one, the ungrateful one. And every time Samantha failed, they expected me to pick up the pieces, financially, emotionally, endlessly. A memory surfaced. I was 16, holding a scholarship letter in my hands, glowing with pride. Linda had looked at me and said, "Don't think this makes you better than Samantha. She has other talents you'll never have." That was the first time I learned that my accomplishments were nothing compared to Samantha's excuses. By dawn, exhaustion weighed on my bones, but my resolve felt sharper than ever. Ava stirred beside me as sunlight slipped through the blinds. Her swollen eyes searched mine, silently asking if we were safe. I kissed her forehead and forced a smile. "We're going to be okay, baby." I dressed her carefully for school, sliding her into her favorite blue dress, braiding her hair the way she liked. My own reflection in the mirror was harder to face. A purpling bruise across my cheekbone, my eye already swelling. Sunglasses would hide some of it, but not the truth. While my parents bickered in the kitchen, we slipped out the back door. I drove Ava to school in silence, my hands gripping the wheel until my knuckles whitened. When I dropped her off, she hugged me tighter than usual, whispering, "Be brave, Mom." Instead of heading to work, I turned the car toward the courthouse. My heartbeat steadied as I parked and walked inside. For the first time in years, I wasn't going to cave, wasn't going to plead for peace that never came. 2 years earlier, I had started putting away every spare dollar, bonuses, freelance gigs, side contracts. At the time, I'd told myself it was for Ava's future, but deep down I knew I was building a shield, a way out. Now, as I stepped into the courthouse with bruises on my skin and fire in my chest, I understood. That shield was about to become my weapon. The courthouse felt colder than I expected. Sterile walls and polished floors reflecting the fluorescent lights above. But as I sat there with a swollen cheek and trembling hands, I felt something warming inside me, a clarity I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. When the judge glanced over the police report and the photographs of my injuries, his gavel came down quickly. An emergency restraining order was granted before noon. For the first time, Linda and Robert were officially barred from entering my home or contacting me and Ava. I walked out with the paper in my hand, my legs shaky but my spirit upright. They had tried to break me with violence, but the law had just given me something they couldn't twist with guilt. Proof that what they had done was wrong. Still, the restraining order was just the beginning. As I sat in my car outside the courthouse, I scrolled through my phone, my thumb hovering over a contact I had kept hidden for months, the property manager of my childhood home. 2 years earlier, when Samantha's endless debts started pulling my parents under, they fell behind on the mortgage. I saw the foreclosure notice before they did. Most children would have mourned, but I saw an opportunity. Through an LLC, with savings from my IT work and a quiet loan from my former boss, the same boss whose company I had saved from a devastating cyber attack. I had purchased the house myself. My parents thought they were renting month to month from a faceless investor. They never imagined that investor was me. At the time, I had told myself it wasn't about revenge. It was about securing a piece of my past before they destroyed it completely. But now, after the bruises, after Ava's frightened sobs, I realized this hidden ownership was no longer just symbolic. It was leverage. I dialed the property manager. Her voice came through, brisk and professional. "Emily, I was about to call you. Your tenants. Well, they've skipped 3 months' rent." "I know," I said softly, though my heart pounded. "Don't send them a notice. Let me handle it directly." She paused. "Are you sure? They're difficult." A bitter smile touched my lips. "They're my parents." Difficult doesn't even begin to describe them. When I hung up, the weight of my decision pressed against me. But it wasn't fear. It was power. For once in my life, I wasn't scrambling to defend myself. I was setting the stage. That night, back at my duplex, I tucked Ava into bed. She clutched her sketchpad, the pages filled with childish drawings of houses, gardens, families holding hands. As she drifted to sleep, I thought about the home I had quietly reclaimed. It wasn't just a house. It was the battleground where my parents had ruled me with fear for decades. And soon, it would become the place where their reign ended. The days that followed were a storm of phone calls, messages, and veiled threats. Blocking one number only meant they would find another. My phone lit up with texts that dripped venom disguised as righteousness. "Linda, you've turned your back on God's commandment to honor your parents." Robert, "Family comes before everything. You'll regret this arrogance." Linda, "Ava will learn who the real villain is. It isn't us." Every word was a dagger aimed at the old version of me. The version that used to cave under guilt. The version that craved their approval. But now, each message only hardened my resolve. What they didn't know was that the eviction clock had already started ticking. I kept my silence, but Samantha didn't. One evening at the grocery store, She cornered me by the produce section. Her cart overflowed with imported cheeses, high-end shampoo, and a designer purse dangling from the handle. Mine held store-brand pasta and vegetables on sale. "You're still playing the victim," Samantha sneered, tossing a bottle of overpriced conditioner into her cart. "Mom and Dad told me everything. You're pathetic, Emily. Hoarding money while your family struggles." I raised an eyebrow. Struggles? Is that what you call buying designer purses with their social security checks? Her smirk faltered. I leaned closer, my voice steady. "You should enjoy this spotlight while you can, because very soon, the stage you're standing on is going to collapse." She blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" I didn't answer. I didn't owe her the truth. Not yet. Some lessons, I thought, could only be learned in the rubble. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Linda or Robert. It was a distant cousin, someone who still spoke to them. "They've been calling everyone in the church. They're saying you've lost your mind, that you're dangerous. They're begging people to pray for you." I closed my eyes, letting the weight of that sink in. It was a tactic I knew well. Weaponizing religion, twisting morality to paint themselves as martyrs. I could almost hear Robert's voice booming from a church pew. "We sacrificed everything for Emily, and look how she repays us." For years, those kinds of accusations would have broken me. But now I knew better. Faith wasn't about blind obedience. It was about truth, justice, and protecting my child from harm. I blocked another number, turned off the phone, and sat at the kitchen table with Ava. She was coloring quietly, filling a page with lavender flowers. "Why do you look so serious, Mom?" she asked, her crayon pausing mid-stroke. I smiled softly. "Because we're about to write a new chapter. One where nobody else gets to decide our worth." She tilted her head, then went back to her drawing. "As long as we're together, it's already a good story." Her words settled into me like a vow. Yes, together. And soon, free. 30 days later, I stood across the street from the house where I had spent my childhood. The house that now legally belonged to me. The air smelled faintly of mildew and cut grass, and the yard was littered with plastic bags, broken furniture, and my mother's rusting patio swing. The property manager had confirmed the eviction order. Linda and Robert had to be out by noon. I wasn't here for a fight. I was here to make sure the law was enforced, to witness the final unraveling of their control. Ava insisted on coming. She wore her little backpack with her sketch pad peeking out, her chin set with determination that reminded me so much of myself. "I want to see what it looks like when people get what they deserve," she had said that morning. It broke my heart that she'd learned such lessons so young, but it also made me proud. As we crossed the street, Linda spotted us. She rushed forward, dragging a battered suitcase, her face flushed with humiliation and rage. "Emily, you can't be serious," she snapped, her voice rising with every word. "We're your family. You're throwing us out like garbage." Her words hit me like echoes from the past. Every guilt trip, every manipulation, every time she'd told me I owed her my life. But I didn't flinch this time. "You treated me like garbage when I needed protection," I said evenly. "You hurt me in front of my child. And now you want sympathy?" Robert stormed out next, pacing like a cornered animal. His shadow stretched long across the cracked driveway as he barked, "You think owning a house makes you powerful? You've grown arrogant. You're nothing but a tenant who bought herself a crown." I held my ground. Ava's hand clasped in mine. "No," I said, voice calm, steady. "I became the landlord of my own life. And yours." He stepped closer, his hand twitching as though he might grab my arm again. Old reflexes screamed at me to back away, to shrink. But I didn't move. My eyes locked on his, sharp as steel. "Touch me again," I warned, "and the police will be here before you can spin your next lie." Something shifted in his eyes then, a flicker of realization that the fear he had wielded all my life no longer worked. His hand fell back to his side. And then Ava, my sweet, trembling daughter, took a step forward. Her voice was small but clear, carrying through the heavy silence. "You shouldn't have hurt my mom. You lied about love." The words cut deeper than any eviction notice ever could. Linda's lips trembled, but no apology came. There never was one. "You'll regret this," she hissed, clutching her handbag like a lifeline. "No," I said softly. "The only regret I have is letting you stay in my life this long." They stood there. Two people stripped of power, their pride scattered on the driveway with the junk they hadn't bothered to pack. I turned to Ava. Let's go. We walked back toward our car without looking back. For the first time, the weight on my shoulders wasn't theirs. It was gone. Our new home wasn't large, but the moment Ava and I stepped inside, it felt like breathing for the first time. The lavender bushes outside swayed in the breeze, filling the air with a calming scent that wrapped around us like a promise. Peace was finally ours. That first evening, I poured chamomile tea for Ava and green tea for myself. We sat together at the small wooden kitchen table, sunlight spilling in through lace curtains I had picked out deliberately, delicate but strong. Ava sipped her tea, her legs swinging under the chair, and asked, "Do you feel better now, Mom?" I thought for a long moment before answering. "I feel clean," I said. "Like something heavy has been washed away." She nodded, as if she understood more than any 8-year-old should have to. The days that followed were not easy, but they were different. I started therapy, finally giving voice to the years of wounds I had buried. Ava enrolled in art classes, pouring her feelings onto canvases instead of carrying them in silence. Every session, every painting, every breath felt like a piece of us was being rebuilt. We didn't speak to Linda and Robert again. The restraining order stood, and I extended it indefinitely. I told my cousin Sarah, the only family member who still tried to update me, that I no longer wanted to hear about them. That chapter was closed. Still, Sarah slipped me one last piece of news. My parents had ended up in a cramped one-bedroom above a shuttered nail salon, while Samantha had disappeared completely, leaving behind nothing but an empty Venmo account and a voicemail full of anger. The empire of manipulation they had built had finally crumbled, and for once, no one rushed to save them. But I didn't gloat. I didn't feel vengeance. What I felt was release. One Sunday afternoon, Ava tugged at my sleeve and proudly showed me her latest painting, a small house with 2 stick figures standing hand in hand beneath a bright yellow sun. Above it, in shaky but determined letters, she had written, "We don't live in fear anymore." Tears filled my eyes as I hugged her. "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," I whispered. And in that moment I knew the truth. This wasn't just survival. It was rebirth. We were no longer trapped in their cycle of guilt, violence, and lies. We were free, building a life defined not by what had been stolen from us, but by what we had chosen to reclaim. For the first time in decades, I closed my eyes and slept without fear.